share my screen as we get started. And what you're going to find is that it is more challenging, to be honest, on the phone, particularly because we're going to be navigating through a lot of materials. And so having those materials open can make things a lot easier for you, and you'll be able to navigate yourselves. One of the things I want to point out is in setting up for almost every session that I do virtually, and I think we all do virtually, one of the tricks is to get your tabs set up as you get started. So what you'll see I have here tonight is I have materials we're going to use. I have the syllabus that we're going to use. I have my teaching channel open where I saw some really interesting and fun discussion about memes and teaching. And I have a Core Tools tab open for where we are going to work, and I have a few other resources. So one of the things you'll want to have on your computer as we go through this course together is when you log in, you'll want to have a few tabs open. Probably the teaching channel, probably the syllabus, and then some Core Tools tabs that can link you to whatever it is that we work on. So we thought that we would start, the other feature that we use a lot is the chat. So if you don't see the chat yet, you'll find it in the black bar, hopefully at the bottom of your screen, where that gives you sort of where your mute is and your video is. If you don't see the chat in that black bar, in the right-hand side, there's a More button with 3 dots. And if you click on it, you'll have the option to hit the chat. So once you open that chat, you are able to communicate, and we often have a side conversation going in the chat as part of the way we'll communicate during this course. So let's all take a minute and try it out. What I'd like to do is think about those great memes that people posted in our discussion in the teaching channel. And so what I'm going to ask you to do is go into that teaching channel discussion and do a little voting. So what was your favorite meme this week? And what we're going to do is post in the chat. And who knows, you might just get your favorite meme vote tonight. So go into the teaching channel and take a look at those memes. And in your chat, you just write the name of the person and a line from the meme or a tag that would help us figure out which one it is. So why don't you take a minute now, navigate into the teaching channel. I'm going to put the link to our group in here in case you don't have it quickly. So it's now in the chat. And vote. What was your favorite meme this week in the discussion? So Daniel's voted for Don's Ready to Impact a District, which looks like some type of maid meme, perhaps.
He had a little too much fun doing those. He was texting me all day on Saturday.
Was he? Oh, see what you can find. What's DBZ? I don't know what that means.
Dragon Ball Z.
Oh, that's what that means. I do know that.
What's it mean? Dragon what?
Dragon Ball Z.
It's an anime. I don't know if you guys, my husband and I are like obsessed with it.
Oh, wow.
My son read them all, Ashley.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I read them all, oh my gosh, like way back in high school.
Mm-hmm. All right, who else has got to vote? We got a lot of people here left to vote. Damn, I have the power of LDC. That's another one of Don's. Right? Mm-hmm. Here we go.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Mm-hmm. Sub plans. Jillian, I think that's you. Oh, and you're going to be out tomorrow, so you know how that feels.
The worst.
We had a Kevin Hart meme. We had Star Trek. We have another vote for the power of LDC. That's 2 so far. Has everybody been able to put in the chat? I think we have a few people left. Another one for subplans. We're in a tie. Okay, Joe, Star Trek. George's love-hate relationship. We do not have a clear winner on the memes, but we have a lot of crowd favorites, it looks like. So good. So I hope you have your tabs open. If you didn't have a chance to look at these, they're really fun, and I think I'm not sure actually. I don't know, but I'm assuming we can take these and use them, right? So some of these ones that you like or favorites, you can hold on to and use again. All right. So as we go through the course, you're going to have a lot of practice going back and forth between your different windows and your different tabs. So getting familiar with that is really useful both as a participant and as a facilitator when you're doing virtual work. So we're going to start out tonight. You know, last week was an orientation and we did an awful lot of talking. Tonight we're going to try to balance that out a little bit. We're going to spend a little bit of time up front and talking a little bit about an LDC overview. And then we're going to do an interactive activity where we look at student work and think about standards in student work. So as you know, if you listen to the orientation, if you heard last week, we're really going to try to figure out how to make the work you do the work you do. So the work you do in here should be the work you do either as a coach or as a teacher. So that's a combination of writing and working on LDC tasks, assignments, instructional plans, as well as giving feedback to each other and to other people. So we're going to try to make this part, this course really support your workflow in doing some of that work. This time together during our PLC is going to be the time when we can practice some things, when we can collaborate in a different way than you can one-on-one with somebody else, like with a partner. And so we're going to try to set it up so that we have this time to do that kind of collaboration and dialogue. We'll be in Zoom, and one of the main things that we do, that we use in for this course is going to be the syllabus. So what I'm going to ask you to do now is go ahead and open the syllabus in your own computer on a new window. You can click to it from this deck. And again, we'll put the link to this deck in here. Or you can click to it from the syllabus if you already have that open. And we have the link in the chat as well. Go ahead and open up the syllabus. Joe, we can see you now, I think. I think that's you. Looks like you. Good, 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 good. So everybody's got their video on. It is useful to have a quiet space and a camera and mic. So as you're figuring that out with your computer, it does make it easier that way. Okay, so syllabus functions, and you can see it's a Google Doc, so you can see everybody coming in. The syllabus really functions as the home base for the course. This is where all of the information you need to do the work, to stay on top of what's going on, and to figure out why you're even here is all centrally located. So we always can go back to the syllabus and find out what the point is. So the way it's structured is there's some overview of what the purposes of blended foundations. We have 3 different very specific purposes. One is for you to work through the workflow of our workflow courses, which are our design assignments and common assignments, instructional cycles. But to figure out how to use that in a workflow supported way so that you can, in turn, use those resources to support the work you do in districts. The other, of course, is to figure out how to do virtual learning and virtual facilitation and have additional experience with that. And finally, the third reason, which is a very direct outcome, is to get feedback on your tasks and to leave here as a rated task author. For those of you who are in coach certification or some type of teacher leadership, that milestone is your first sort of major milestone in that credentialing process. So our goal through Blended Foundations is that everyone leaves here as a rated task author with an exemplary or good to go task in the public collections in Pro Tools. So you have some information about that. You have an overview of the sort of different types of commitments that happen. Every week we'll meet in PLC synchronously. Every week there will be some asynchronous work to do. Every week there'll be a discussion about that work. And those are basically the 3 main things that will happen. So you have in here also an information about the asynchronous work. So typically that's going to be working on your task and module in Core Tools and then discussing the work that you did and the content that you use to help you in that work. All right, so you have your contact information, where to go, Zoom information, all that kind of stuff. But here we go in the important sort of week by week plan. So in the left-hand column, you'll have what we're here in week 1. You'll have the focus of what our synchronous work is going to be. You also have the what the follow-up work to this session is. So what's going to happen between now and our next session is listed here in the right-hand column. So left-hand work is our PLC work, and right-hand column is our in-between asynchronous work that happens as we get ready for the next session. So that's the structure of the syllabus. And so we're gonna get going. Another link, and I always have this open in my windows, are the LDC competencies, because all of the work of LDC is designed to help people gain certain really important instructional skills, right? We call them competencies. But all of the work you do through this course and any other engagement with LDC is specifically designed to support enduring instructional skills. Enduring means you use them for the rest of your lives in lots of different situations, not necessarily LDC specific, and skills that you take and get better and better at as you become more and more experienced in this type of backward design. The 2 main skills we'll work on in this course are competency 1A, which is the big one, and competency 2A, and those are the standards competencies. And the reason we're focusing on those is it's a task course. We're going to be talking about tasks. So recognizing how standards work in assignments, and then being able to use standards to actually drive the thinking and rigor of an assignment. So recognizing standards and how they drive an assignment in other people's assignments, and then being able to do that in your own. So those 2 competencies are the focus of this syllabus and the work that we'll do here in this course. Okay, so just for a little break while I move over to the PowerPoint, would like everybody just really quickly to write in 1 or 2 words that you're thinking about as I've been talking. I see, Daniel, you've already written something, so just add your chat as I move over. Yeah, there are a lot of tabs. So I'm gonna, the other thing I want to point out, just so I struggle with keeping them straight. So one of the things, another trick that I do is I organize my tabs in a linear fashion. So the thing I'm going to use first goes on the left, and then the things that I'm going to use next go to the right. And so I set those up beforehand so that I can remember the order, to be honest, because otherwise I can't remember. Okay, so one of the things about LDC is the question of how to begin using these tools and resources, and why on earth you would begin to use these tools and resources anyway. So one of the things I want to review, and you have these, this overview, you have the slide deck, so it's something you can use in your own practice and think about as you coach, as you teach, as you lead in the settings in your school, or in your district, or in your territory, depending on what your range is. So one of the things that we really like to think about is thinking about why these tools have been put together in the particular way that they have. And the main reason for that is a lot of the research around school transformation and systemic change in schools, school buildings, school districts, and across larger networks. And that is related to this research coming out of Richard Elmore, as well as a lot of other people, which is that there are 3 ways that to improve student learning at scale. One is to raise the level of rigor in the content that students encounter. The other, of course, is to raise the level of active engagement rather than passive engagement that students have in the content. And the third is to increase the skill and knowledge that teachers have. And there's a lot of research around if you do one of those or you do 2 of those, you don't get systemic change that can last over time. So part of the LDC toolbox is designed to do all of those 3 things together at the same time. It's not easy to do alone. In fact, we're all here together proving the point that doing it alone is really hard. So doing it with people is always better, and collaborating is always a more effective way to get to the mission of changing the experience for students of rigorous intellectual discourse and exploration in school, which is basically the bottom line. Can students have that kind of experience with school, and can they produce outcomes that are different in any way, that raise their level of trajectory for their lives? So here's a quick example of how people think through why would they do this? Why would they use these tools at all? So this is the school district team. The school district team thinks about how do we develop those teacher skills and those student skills to interact with text with intentional and deliberate purpose, and then to write with the same intentional, deliberate purpose. And how do we make this happen systemically, not just in one classroom, but across all of the classrooms where students travel and journey? So the main question that we always ask at the beginning is, what is it that you care about? Like, what are your issues? What are your challenges? What work are you trying to do? Identify the work you care about first, and then let's see if the LDC tools can help you do that work. Often the work falls into 3 categories. Rigor, people want more rigorous work for kids. Instruction, they want more consistent instruction. They want more disciplinary specific instruction. They want more formative assessment in their instruction. And then alignment, they want to know if their curriculum is actually teaching what their standards demand, and vice versa, right? Those kinds of things. So a district thinks about what it is they want to do, and then identify what skills their teachers will need in order to be able to do that work. Most often, as in our course, they are related to standards. So those 1A and 2A competencies come up really often. And then districts often think about, well, given that's the work we want to do, and given those are the skills we want our teachers to have, how do we think about what the LDC curriculum anchors will be used for? Because if they're just used for one teacher, one classroom, we only get the bang for that teacher, for those students. How can we use this across our system? And then once we know why we're going to develop these instructional resources, we can think about how. Do we want individuals developing them? Do we want groups of people developing them? Are they going to become part of a larger network of curricula? How on earth are we going to do this work? And then an individual site or school says, okay, we know why we're doing this. We understand how the work is going to fit into a larger schema. How are we going to get the work done? We need a work plan. We probably need a coach. We need some time to do the work. We probably need some content to use to do the work. And we probably need to figure out a way to formatively assess ourselves to know if we're getting anywhere toward our goals. We need rubrics to help us figure out whether we're commonly assessing those student outcomes in the same ways. Do we have a common language? Are we collaborating around outcomes, not around inputs necessarily, right? And can we figure out what we're doing as a cohort, as a school, what kind of work we're doing, what's the impact of the coaching work, how are we driving to those student outcomes? So that's kind of the process of thinking about why to do this work, and situating the work within a larger context, because we've seen over and over again that just having teachers work on individual modules can be super helpful and useful, particularly in collaboration, but then we want to expand that beyond the reach of that one teacher to think about what does that mean for a school community, and then what does that mean for a district community, and what does that mean for a state. So I'm going to ask you to in the chat again, think about what's the most common why that you hear in your work from people, like why are people using these tools? And then we're going to transition. Mm-hmm. All right, these are the questions we're going to explore. This is the basis for, yeah. I think so. Okay, so these are all really interesting reasons why we hear this all the time. And really honest, right? Yeah. How is LDC not just one more thing? So one of the things that for you to be thinking about then, especially because you're leaders and either teacher leaders in your sites or coach leaders or district leaders or system leaders, I think we have people on this call in all walks of life, is how do you situate this work so that you have systemic impact? That's the question at hand. How do you raise the level of knowledge and expertise of teachers, quality and rigor of the content, active engagement of the students, so that you have systemic impact that's sustainable? And that's a big important question. How do you sustain this beyond the interest of one particular teacher in a school or something like that? Mm-hmm. So Kimba,
Yep.
I'm going to unshare my screen and I'm going to turn this over to Kimba. So Kimba, in case for those of you who don't know, she's not going to, we have a couple different people who are going to be joining me during the process of this course. Kimba's been one, of course, and then Rob Kasher, or formerly Kantner, if you know Rob, will be joining us as well. But Kimba's going to all of our certification and all of our offerings for teacher leaders, coaches, and any type of credentialing. So it's been really a great, I feel lucky that she's been here at the beginning of this to help us get going. So, oops, I have to stop sharing, don't I? Okay.
Yep. All right. So I'm actually going to share my whole desktop, which I generally don't do because there's a few things I want to call out as we start to dig in, because at the very beginning of this, part of what one of the slides called out is that we're going to try our hardest to follow the 80-20 rule, where about 80% of the time we're really digging into the materials and thinking through them and having a lot of collaborative discussion about the decision points and the learning and how to use the courses to support the learning in just-in-time experiences for teachers. To kind of get to that question of how do you get it past it feeling like one more thing, or why do I use core tools, and try to address some of those questions that have been coming up in the chat. And so right now you can see where my Zoom window is here and I have another window here. What we're going to be doing is moving into core tools and then their Learn tab, because our focus of our work is really going to be driven by having the same experience within the courses that we'd want our teachers to have within the courses. And so you'll be going through them the way a teacher would. And one of the things that we're going to start with is really building from that backwards design standpoint. You know, if our goal is to improve the evidence of standards and the thinking in the authentic writing experiences of students, well, maybe that's where we should start. And so we're actually going to be going into the Learn tab to do an activity where we're going to look at student work for evidence of standards. And I know some of you have done this before. A lot of you, this is going to be a first experience. And so I want to kind of guide you through this process. And so because this first one, we're a little bit off of the 80-20 rule, because we want to do a lot of time trying to set you up for success between managing tabs and managing windows and all that stuff that happens in a virtual environment. And once you become more comfortable and flexible with it, it'll feel much more natural. And so one of the things that you'll see I'm doing here is I have my Zoom window, and I just manually kind of slide it over so I can still see when somebody's sharing their screen, or I can see people when we're talking. And then I have my other window that I have core tools open in. And so if you want to use the link that Suzanne posted in the chat, that'll take you right into core tools. And once you get in here, where we want you to go is to click on the Learn tab. When you click on the Learn tab, which this week in preparation for it, hopefully you're already kind of exploring some of these courses a little bit, getting started in design assignments, which is where we're going to go now. So you'll click on design assignments. And once you do, you'll see IC1, IC2, and IC3. These are the instructional cycles of the new courses. Now, I know some of you have a lot of experience with the level 2 courses, and these are now the level 1 courses, which are meant to follow more of a PLC instructional cycle process, where it's more similar to lesson study. And so we'll talk a lot more about that over the next few weeks. And so if you hit this plus sign for IC1, that'll open up the table of contents. And so we're actually going to go to session 2, which is analyze student work for evidence of focus standards. So what you'll want to do is go ahead and click on that, and that'll take us right into this session. So the pathway is Learn tab. I'm going to go through it one more time and make sure everybody can get there. You'll go to design assignments. Click on that tile. If you're having any issues with seeing this under your Learn tab, just let us know in the chat and we'll take care of it from our end. Open that plus sign to see the table of contents for IC1 and click on session 2, analyze student work for evidence of standards. Now, mine automatically jumped a little further down. There's some really great content here. We're going to talk more about that. However, for right now, go ahead and just scroll down to this action item. This is what we're going to focus in on for the next little while of our session tonight. and go ahead and look at some student work. Now, many of you who, if you've done this before, a lot of times we start with the ELA. I'm actually going to have us do the science one. So if you click this, click to access a science module. And when I click that open, and I got to pull my window over just a little bit more, you'll see this sidebar open up that's full of directions, and it's kind of like having the coach over your shoulder, because you can still interact with the content in the main window, and you'll have directions and questions and guidance here for you in the right-hand side. So what we're going to do is we're going to follow the first step, open one of the following modules. So let's go ahead and do fire down below. And when you click that, it'll go ahead and open that, and you can see all these wonderful names who are in here. It's kind of like a Google Doc where you can see everybody who's in the room, for those of you who are still figuring out core tools. So let's go ahead and look at steps 2 through 4. So read the prompt and focus standards, and think about these questions as you read. What's the task asking students to think about, and where do you see the language of the focus standards in the task prompt? And so after researching informational texts and conducting a laboratory experiment on the effectiveness of antacids, write a formal lab report in which you compare the ability of antacids to neutralize excess stomach acid. Support your discussion with evidence from your research. In your discussion, address the credibility and origin of sources in view of your research topic. Identify any gaps or unanswered questions. So down below, you'll see the standards that have been listed as the focus standards. So take a couple of minutes and read through the standards, take a look at this task, and think about, what do you see? And we're going to talk about that in just a second. So again, what is the task asking students to think about? And where do you see the language of the focus standards in the task prompt? So now, because I'm sharing my whole desktop, I can actually pull this over, and we can actually see each other. And I love having the gallery view. So if you haven't clicked that button when I'm not sharing my screen, you can get this same view where you see all the little tiles of everyone going across, and it feels more like a conversation. So I'm just curious. Go ahead and unmute. What are you noticing? What is the thinking work of this task?
Can I jump in?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I was reading through this, and it looks like the teacher wants their students to research, write a formal lab report, and then like identify any gaps or unanswered questions. And I don't know if this was intentional or not, but like when I was reading this, I took discussion to mean that they're like talking with somebody else or talking with classmates. And I didn't see a standard aligned to it. So I don't know if they meant discussion like in the lab report. Does that make sense?
Completely makes sense. And I think about it as in your discussion in which you're doing this comparison right here. So,
yeah, and like it took me a minute to be like, oh, like discussion writing the lab report, but if you want them to write, then I would maybe change the word to write so that it aligns better with the standards that they have set.
Great. How about other people? What do you notice?
I might be wrong, but I think the 3 science standards are embedded into the reading process, which technically isn't the reading process, it's the data gathering process. And then they're using that information as part of what they can use in their comparison. So they're going to use their scientific notebook in which they collected their data in order to embed that into the lab report itself. And of course, the lab report would be the informational writing, which is what the writing standard is.
So in the student work, you should probably see some kind of comparison, right, between different antacids to then neutralize that excess stomach acid, drawing from the science that underpins why that happens, right? Where they're using what they saw in their research within this formal lab report, right? You should see where they're able to follow this multi-step procedure within it and be drawing from those steps within their lab report and how things came about, right? Maybe you'll see some type of explanation for the outcome, right? Based on those scientific principles of what they discovered. So when we think about what we should see in the student work, when we want to be coding it for evidence of this thinking, these are the kinds of things we're going to look for. Now, one of the things that's here in this sidebar is there's a really nice succinct little description here. And I like using it to kind of test my own thinking to see if I'm calling out the right types of things of what the task and standards are saying. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go down to the next step in this process. So when we look at step 5, we're going to look at student paper. And so we need to scroll down to the bottom. And Dawn, I'm calling you out. Open up the student sample, but don't open up the coded one because we're going to practice coding. I just know you've done that before. That's why I'm teasing you, Dawn. So go ahead and click on that. And what'll happen is it'll download a Word document that then you'll open up. And so I'm going to open up this Word document. And now I can use it. Did I hit the coded one?
No.
Okay. I'm going to try one more time because that just seemed odd. Oh, it's just because it's the standards. Okay. So here on the document itself, you'll see the prompt at the top. You'll see the standards, and there's already some color coding that you can use to guide your analysis of the task itself, of the student writing. And so what you're going to do is use these pieces. And I would say go ahead and just focus on the reading standard and the science standard, the content standards, to think about how do you see the thinking work of the research and the experiment, their ability to analyze their results based upon their explanations in the text and different pieces that are part of this lab, right? And do you see that in this lab report? And so what I'm going to do is if I see something that looks like where there were method controls, variables that were called out, there was revision of these methods or explanations, then I'd be highlighting that. So say that was right here, I'd be highlighting it with that color and coding it accordingly. And so we're going to take, let's take about 5 minutes. I know that won't let you get all the way through it, but it'll give you a chance to kind of think through some of what you see in the student work itself, and start coding it. And let's just see what we find. Do you see evidence of the standards in the student work? And so what I really want you to think about are these questions. Does the student demonstrate evidence of the thinking described by the focus standard? Right? If so, where is it? And so just see what you find. And I'm going to change my screen sharing setting so we can talk about a few other things and you don't have to see it so cluttered. Okay, I'm going to start pulling you back from your thinking. I want you to take just a minute, and I'm going to put some partners in the chat. And I'm going to have you do a partner chat. So if you haven't figured out how to do a private partner chat yet, I just want you to tell your partner what you noticed. And then, so this, I think this list came out okay. So I have Dan with Jillian, Dawn with Kenneth, Twyla with Quentin, Connie and Kim, Pam and Steve, Kelly and Ashley, Carolee and George, Leo and Joe, and then Dana. I'll be your partner. I think I got everybody a partner. If I missed anybody, let me know. But what I'd like you to do is consider these questions in number 9. What evidence did you find or not find of the reading standard or of the content standard? And just think about 1 or 2 key takeaways that you can share with your partner. And take a minute and type that to them. The way to do a personal chat is where you have that blue button right above where you posted in the chat. That drop-down menu, you can select one person and go ahead and chat with them. So my partner is Dana. So I'm going to pick Dana and I'm going to start my private chat with her. And so just 1 or 2 things that really stood out to you when you were looking at the students' writing. Maybe there was really strong evidence of some standards and not of the other, or what did you see? Okay, a couple of quick takeaways and then we're going to reconvene as a group. Okay, hopefully you're getting a chance to type a little bit. Oh, I just realized I was typing and I wrote the wrong word. Sorry about that, Dana. A little bit with your partner, have a little bit of back and forth. And what I'd like to do is I'm gonna stop sharing. And what were some of the key things that you noticed? Did you see evidence in the students' writing of the standards? If so, which ones from that list? Some of you have these tired expressions, thoughtful expressions on your face.
Sorry, Susan, I was focused. What did you want us to do again?
All right, I'm gonna pull you back and just share out what'd you notice. Let's hear from a few people from your processing time with your partner. What'd you see as far as?
I noticed what stood out was the science experiment. I mean, the process of doing a science experiment. And I kind of skipped to the end of the piece. And there's a whole thing where she's reflecting on, or he is reflecting on the process of doing the experiment, which then went back and that's a part of the science standard, very explicit part. So to me, you get very strong thinking like a scientist points for that one.
I think it's great. How about other people? Did anybody find evidence of the NGSS standard in there? Did you see that?
I didn't get to that one yet. But I agree. I think this student did pretty good with the science standard in the discussion area. Like I found a lot of evidence of them like critically thinking and like backing up whatever it is they had to say. And then I thought that the reading standard was kind of addressed in the experimental procedure, but I was just confused like why they started out saying like I and making it a narrative, and then they switched to like you, and I don't know, it just sounded like they were like copying, or maybe it's just me being like a picky English teacher, but it bothered me like how they changed from I to you in that. So I don't know if that really like covered the reading standard.
I'm having the same issue.
Okay, it's not just me.
No, it's not just you.
It was driving me crazy.
I just was having a hard time figuring out why there were nonfiction articles in the process that fit with the reading standard that never popped up again in any other piece. So that seemed weird to me that there was kind of a disconnect there.
Well, and I think that's really interesting too, because when you look at that NGSS standard, you know, construct and revise explanation, and you're basing it on those chemical understandings and things about electrons and all that. And so it was like, what are the science principles that underpin why certain ingredients work better than others? And that's what I kept hoping for. And I wondered about, and this is what's really exciting when you start honing in on the student work and thinking about the standards, is because now you can start having that conversation about, okay, what are the next steps, right? What do I need to do with these students? Is there something I should go back and reteach that I think is really important? Is there something that I need to revise in the task because did it ask what I was hoping to get to? where does it lie and how do I move them forward? And so that's the whole purpose and intention behind the instructional cycles, and grounding our thinking and what we're doing in student work and how we move them forward in their thinking in really meaningful ways with teachers. And so that's the journey that you guys are going to be starting over these next few weeks, writing a task and thinking about these decision points, seeing it housed in the context of these Learn Tab sessions where you have these thoughtful questions and prompts and guidance through these decision points to see how you can use that to support teachers in meaningful ways. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Suzanne. I know we're getting pretty close to time, and there's some things we want to talk about as far as next steps.
So yeah, I didn't have a partner, so I didn't get to talk, but the thing I'm thinking about is that part of the reading standard, which was around analyze the specific results based on explanations in the text. And I'm assuming text is also from the research experiment stuff. And then also this construct and revise an explanation for the outcome. Like, it reminds me that it's not just an ELA where we struggle with that analysis piece. You know how I often hear teachers say, like, I can teach the kids to make a claim. I can teach the kids to bring evidence. The last piece, which is the hardest and most meaty, is to analyze why I'm using that evidence, how that proves my point, why I chose that from my explanation. Like, that is hard in science as well as in ELA and in everything else, because yeah, it's hard. Okay. Oh, I'll talk about this for a lot longer. I don't have time. Okay, so for next time, we're really going to start diving into the work. We do have a question at hand as a group to address, which is one of the classes is scheduled for Halloween, and lots of people have children and do things on Halloween, and coming here does not make a whole lot of sense. So we have two choices. One is we can have class on Wednesday of that week. The other choice is we can extend out a week in our cycle. So what I'd like you to do now, if you would, is in the chat, would you please vote for your choice? Would you rather do Wednesday of that week and end as expected on November 28th? Or would you rather skip that week and end on December 5th? So that's the issue at hand here. So go ahead and put that in there, and we'll tally up and see how we do. All right, so while you're thinking of that, so I want to, I'm gonna share my screen again, show you two things before we go. One is that in the syllabus, you'll notice that we have that what we're going to be doing is finishing the Why Do This Work session in the courses and finishing session 2. Now that's the session that we just worked on that is around analyzing student work. So returning to this, looking at some of the other papers if they interest you, thinking about the reflections. If you want to go back and really think about focus standards and how focus standards work, you can go ahead and do that. What you'll find in the teaching channel is that whatever is the work of the asynchronous is listed here at the top of our discussion board step, our learning plan step every time. So this is we're in week 1 now, Why Do This Work? And following this PLC, it gives you kind of just step-by-step what to do before next week so that you have it all in one place and you can find it there as needed. I think that's the last thing. So before we leave, as you can tell, we use the chat an awful lot. I'm going to ask you to do what we call final word. We'll do this every time, which is a summary exercise. It's also a gist exercise or exit slip, in case you're thinking about it in that way. So what we ask is that you think about the word or phrase that sort of summarizes your thinking here tonight, or is the question you'll be pondering as you leave here tonight. What is your takeaway from the session tonight? And write that into the chat.